Something had already begun changing, and the individuals who recognized it first did not waste time questioning it or doubting what they understood. They didn't panic or react emotionally, because powerful people do not rely on emotion when facing uncertainty. They rely on awareness and observation. Phones were intentionally left behind because distractions reduce clarity, and clarity was now more valuable than communication or explanation. Their attention had shifted away from daily operations and towards something far more important that required their full mental presence. Movement began quietly and deliberately, without public announcement, without explanation, and without hesitation from those who understood the importance of timing. Each of them moved independently, but their actions reflected the same internal realization that something had fundamentally changed. They had spent their entire lives building systems based on prediction, stability, and controlled outcomes, but now those systems were behaving differently. And when systems behave differently, powerful individuals do not ignore it. They investigate it carefully and strategically. That is why they chose to gather privately, in a place designed for focus, privacy, and uninterrupted clarity of thought. Security was present not because they were afraid, but because privacy protects awareness, and awareness protects strategic advantage. Every movement they made was calm, controlled, and intentional, reflecting their ability to remain stable during uncertainty. This meeting was not about emotional reaction. It was about strategic understanding and alignment of awareness. Because understanding allows powerful individuals to act with precision and confidence rather than hesitation or confusion. They weren't reacting to fear, they were responding to awareness that had already changed their perception of the future. Their presence in that room represented focus, discipline, and strategic clarity rather than emotional concern. Because silence creates space for observation, and observation creates accurate understanding. They understood that timing determines advantage, and advantage determines survival in uncertain environments. And survival at their level required calm awareness rather than emotional reaction. They remained calm, stable, and focused on understanding what others had not yet recognized. Because early awareness creates opportunity, while delayed awareness creates vulnerability. They were not confused, they were simply adjusting their awareness to a new reality. Adjustment is necessary when certainty no longer exists, and stability requires accurate perception of change, because perception determines decision quality, and decision quality determines future outcomes. This meeting existed for one reason: clarity. Clarity allows confident action without hesitation, and confident action protects stability. Stability protects survival in uncertain times, because uncertainty had already begun affecting their world, and they were responding before others even noticed. Awareness always comes before action, and ultimately, it is action that determines the outcomes of every strategic move. They understood this completely. That is why they gathered. Once every seat in the room was filled, no one rushed to speak, because each individual present understood that this moment was not ordinary, and whatever they were about to confirm would affect every decision they made moving forward. These were individuals who had built their lives on control, precision, and accurate prediction, and they had never gathered like this unless something existed beyond their individual ability to fully understand alone. Each of them had observed changes independently, subtle disruptions that appeared insignificant at first, but over time, those disruptions formed patterns that could no longer be dismissed or ignored. Patterns had always provided stability, and stability had always allowed them to move confidently, but now those patterns were shifting in ways that introduced uncertainty into systems they had trusted completely. Uncertainty does not create panic in powerful individuals, it creates focus, because focus allows them to understand what others fail to recognize until it becomes unavoidable. Time had always been their greatest advantage, because they understood the importance of acting early rather than reacting late, and now timing had become more important than ever before. They were not reacting emotionally, they were analyzing carefully, because emotional reactions create instability, while calm analysis creates strategic clarity and accurate understanding. This location existed to provide privacy, because privacy allows uninterrupted thinking, and uninterrupted thinking allows accurate perception of complex changes. Their offices continued operating without them, but their attention had shifted entirely toward understanding what was happening beyond their normal routines. Because routine operations no longer represented their highest priority, awareness had become their primary focus. Awareness allows preparation, and preparation protects stability when conditions begin changing unexpectedly. They understood that reacting late reduces available options, and reduced options increase vulnerability. Vulnerability is something powerful individuals avoid at all costs, because vulnerability reduces control over future outcomes. Control had always defined their success, and losing control was never acceptable. This meeting existed to protect their ability to maintain control through understanding. Understanding provides clarity, and clarity allows confident strategic decisions. Confident decisions protect stability during uncertain transitions. They had arrived quietly, not to announce anything, but to confirm their awareness collectively. Collective awareness provides stronger clarity than individual observation, because shared understanding reduces uncertainty. Reduced uncertainty protects strategic positioning for the long term. Strategic positioning protects stability in an ever-changing world. Stability protects survival against the unknown. Survival protects future control over the global systems they have spent their lives building. Future control depends on present awareness. Present awareness allows accurate decision-making. Accurate decisions protect long-term outcomes. Long-term outcomes define their survival. They understood that survival required clarity for the path ahead. Clarity required focus, intense and unwavering. Focus required privacy, absolute and complete. Privacy required this meeting, behind closed doors. This meeting required awareness of the shifting tides. Awareness required action, decisive and immediate. And action would determine everything that happens next. The silence inside the room was no longer just silence, it had become awareness. Each individual present understood that this moment represented something far beyond a normal meeting. This was not about business expansion, not about profit, and not about competition. This was about understanding a reality that had already begun shifting. Beneath the surface of everything they had spent their lives building and controlling, for decades, they had relied on their ability to predict outcomes before others even recognized the possibility of change. That ability had created their power, their wealth, and their influence. But now they were facing something moving without their involvement, without their approval, and without their ability to prevent its early stages from unfolding. This realization did not create visible panic, because panic belongs to those without control. Instead, it created strategic awareness. Because powerful individuals do not react emotionally to change, they study it, they measure it, and they position themselves to survive it. They understood something most people never realize: control is not permanent. Control exists only as long as conditions remain predictable. The moment conditions begin to shift beyond prediction, control must be rebuilt through awareness, discipline, and immediate strategic adaptation. The systems they had trusted and the structures they had built were all showing signs of subtle instability, not collapse, but transition. And transition is the most dangerous phase, because it hides its true direction until it becomes irreversible. Time had always been their greatest advantage, because they understood how to move before others even recognized the need. But now, time was no longer offering advantage. Time was creating pressure, reducing their ability to position themselves effectively. They understood that hesitation creates exposure, and exposure creates vulnerability. And vulnerability is something they are trained to eliminate. This location had been chosen for one reason: isolation. Because isolation removes distraction, and distraction prevents accurate perception of reality. Their companies continued operating, their systems continued running, but their attention had shifted completely because something deeper required their presence. Calmness was not comfort, calmness was discipline. Discipline allowed them to think clearly while others would react emotionally. They were not reacting to fear, they were responding to awareness that had already changed their understanding of the future. They knew the future would not wait for permission. The future would continue moving forward regardless of who was prepared. Preparation was no longer optional. Preparation was necessary for survival. Security was there to protect them from distraction, because distraction prevents awareness, and awareness is the foundation of survival. Each had arrived knowing this moment defines their future. Each of them had arrived knowing that this moment would define their future decisions. The world outside continued moving normally. The world outside continued moving normally, unaware that its direction was already beginning to change. But inside, everything was already different. They understood what was happening, even if they did not fully understand why. Understanding would come through alignment. Understanding would come through alignment. Alignment would create clarity, clarity would create strategy, strategy would create survival. Survival would protect their future, and protecting their future required action. Not later, not eventually, but now. Because delay creates vulnerability, and vulnerability creates loss of control. Loss of control was never acceptable. That is why they gathered. Because awareness creates advantage, and advantage creates survival. Survival creates continuity. Continuity protects everything they had built. The moment to act had already arrived. The future had arrived quietly, asking them one question. Are you prepared to lose what you think you control? A simple folder, unmarked and ordinary, carries the weight of global empires. On every screen, the mask of normalcy was slipping, and the room started feeling like a deadline. They witnessed a pattern that didn't care who they were, only about momentum. When time stops being a tool, it becomes a judge, and the verdict comes without warning. They were late to something they thought they were early for, and that is where empires die. 12 different perspectives landed on one conclusion: the storm was real. Preparation at their level looks like building alternative realities. It wasn't about money, it was about timing, ethics, and the weight of consequence. In this situation, selfishness was punished because backlash destroys stability. This wasn't a market cycle. This was a system correction where old rules die. The moment they act, they influence billions of lives without asking permission. You can't build a wall high enough to ignore a burning world. Coordination requires trust, and trust at their level is action. The best power is the power nobody notices. The meeting became dangerous, not politically but spiritually. If we only protect ourselves, we lose everything anyway. Quiet solutions become structural improvements. They accepted that their job was to build what comes next. Responsibility creates the kind of pressure money cannot remove. They decided what would be public and what would remain hidden. Their posture carried the weight of a plan that will reshape the world. Their power was never built on noise, it was built on action. Quiet infrastructure projects accelerated, but the public wouldn't notice the blueprint. He was returning with a heavy secret, and knowledge changes behavior. The public started feeling a tension in the air without understanding it. Most of the world will never know the details, but they will live inside the results. They had to act ordinary while managing extraordinary uncertainty. They moved early, not because they were paranoid, but because they were awake. At 2:17 a.m., the most powerful decisions happen in silence and darkness. A new set of rules written quietly while everyone else is living their normal life. The plan was intentional, designed to reduce chaos and build bridges through uncertainty. They weren't just buying safety, they were buying time for the world to catch up. The real question isn't whether it's happening, but are you awake enough to adapt? Once it turns, it never turns back.